Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with a couple who works together, something that we can relate to. Together, their credits include Painted Angels, A Change in the Weather, and A Clever Woman. We're pleased to welcome director-writer Jon Sanders and actress-writer Anna Mottram. Anna, Jon, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, welcome.
It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. Well, I think it's a pleasure.
It's great to see you guys too. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, oh dear.
We'd like to start with our usual question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Did both of you know what you wanted to be when you were young, or did you go down another path and then find this? What's your story? Whoever wants to start first.
I do know exactly when it started. When I was an undergraduate, I did theatre. And I wasn't sure, and I got quite a name, I was quite good at it, etc., but I wasn't sure, I didn't know what was going on. One afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, I was writing an essay, and I remember what that essay was. I did history. It was about mercantilism in the Netherlands in the 18th century. I mean, obscure, like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, it just got to me. I thought, no, I got to go out. And in those days, the Everyman Cinema, or whatever cinema it was, the art cinema, was in the middle of the town. So I went out, left my essay, went downstairs, went to the thing, and I walked into La Notte with Antonioni, and which was very exciting, so Jean Moreau and Mastroianni and Monica Vitti. But more importantly, I began to realize that I could kind of read it. And there was one particular cut. Mastroianni is going to see his old friend in hospital, and a girl, kind of really crude, kind of nymphomania, stupid thing, grabbed hold of him. And there was a cut of this girl pinned against a white wall like that, like a moth, like an object. And I suddenly realized this was a language. This just wasn't cinema. This just wasn't going to the movies. This was a language, and I got the language. And that was the moment when I realized this is what I want to do.
What were you studying up to that point, and did you just suddenly stop and study film?
It was history. You couldn't, and it was at Cambridge. You can't study cinematography at Cambridge. But what happened was, because it's a smart university and all the rest of it, you could if you had a mind to and you had a reputation, go straight into directing the BBC. Say you could, but I had a very strong instinct, very very strong, that I thought, no, I'll just be some little twat that doesn't know what he's doing, talking to actors, talking rubbish, etc., etc., etc. So I really told myself, no, you've got to learn about all this. You've got to learn technical stuff. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. And I went to the Slade. Thorold Dickinson, the director who did Gaslight, Queen of Spades, etc., had a tiny, tiny class, maybe 12 people. And it was a 2-year course. And every week we watched 2 feature films in really great circumstances, properly projected. And we had a direct link to the Cinémathèque in Paris, so that films could come straight there without going through customs. And he was very, very connected to the great directors of Europe. So, for instance, when the Règle de Jeu showed, who came and sat next to us was Jean Renoir. And next day, we were in Thorold's office listening to what Jean Renoir had to say. I mean, the master of the masters. It was that wow. Kind of situation. But what we learned about the history of cinema from the very day one to up until that time, which was 1960 something or other. And he explained to us the technological changes that happened, whether it's sound or the film stock, etc., etc. Also the geopolitical changes, and also people, directors, and so on and so forth. So he used to say, no film's an island. It's always connected to this film, this film, this film. So when we did Nouveau Vague, we knew where it came from. When we did neorealism, we knew what had happened to Italy beforehand, that their infrastructure had been destroyed, etc., etc., etc. So it was, in a way, it was an extraordinary overall education in the history of cinema. But talking to a very good director who would talk us through what was going on set, as far as So it wasn't academic.
Oh.
It was the point of view. He was a director, and he would explain things. Sometimes when you asked him about his own films, he pretended not to know, because I think he was kind of. He told us that the day his last film came out, Carry On started, and he knew that was the end of his career.
The end of filmmaking at the beginning of the end.
and it upset him, and it was very understandable that it had upset him. So anyway, yes. So I owe a huge amount to Thorold Dickinson. Huge.
And what about you, Anna? Did you know right away?
No. I always wanted to. I was always interested in acting, and I went to a very strict school. I went to a convent school in the Midlands, which, all these things were frowned upon. And also my family background was, my mother always wanted me to do, I went to Birmingham to read French originally. And my mother was very keen, that I get a good job and be a teacher, because her father, her whole family, in fact, were in the film industry, but not as filmmakers. But my grandfather worked for Gaumont British in distribution, and my great auntie, who became a nun, was a projectionist. But the whole family were involved in cinema in the 50s and things. And of course, when television started, the whole industry just went belly up. It just disappeared. And my granddad, a wonderful man, ended up running a pub in Manchester. So my mother thought that, it was the beginning of she was really anxious about security and things. So, of course, I went to Birmingham and read French, spent all my time doing theatre. And in the end, I left early and got a job. And that was in the days where you could get a job, an acting job, if you were determined enough. And I toured in, all sorts of things, young people's theatre, and ended up working it was the time in the sort of 70s when there was so much money in alternative theatre. It was just the Arts Council were handing out grants to people. I worked for Portable Theatre, for Howard Brenton, David Hare, people like that. And we just got money from the Arts Council, and we thought that was going to go on forever. And of course, then Margaret Thatcher got in and it all disappeared. But they were amazing times, like in the late 70s up into the 80s, where alternative theatre was the way forward. I mean, I actually, then I got more sort of conventional jobs, television and things. But it was an extraordinary time, and a time where you thought you could create your own work somehow. So
that's great.
Yeah, but that's sort of really, I suppose, where Jon and I started having, I co-wrote.
Let me interrupt here, because I went out with an actress, Anna, and we were living together. And one day we went to see Gloria by Cassavetes in our local cinema. And it put us in such a good mood. I said to Anna, do you think we should get married?
Yes. Thank you, Jenna Rowlands.
Yeah, wow.
And she said, do you mean babies? And I said, yes. So 3 babies and 6 films later, here we are.
Wow. But when you left the Slate, I mean, we met. You were a sound recordist, right?
Yes.
So why did you take that
I'll tell
direction?
you what happened. I became an editor before the sound recording, and I actually edited a feature film when I was about 24 or 25 for James Scott, a friend of mine, and I worked with Barney Platts Mills as an assistant editor.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and Then I was meant to be part of the editing team for The Night Cleaners, which is a kind of historical, Black Street Film Cooperative, a historical film. It's quite, it's aesthetically quite avant-garde, and it's political. Anyway, I had been, sometime before that, I'd been sent to do playback on a feature film. And I'd never been on a big set before. And there was a dance going on. They were all dressed up as RAF women and men. And I kind of got myself friendly with the boom operator and was chatting to him. He's a really, really nice guy. And in the middle of this take, which I was playing back, this young guy, Bob Yulcott, you know him, picked up...
Yeah, Bobby, yeah.
Yeah, picked up a microphone, crawled out into the middle of the set on the floor, waved up the microphone, got a line and crawled back. And I said, Bobby, is that what you do? Is that your job? He said, no. Then we became good friends. And he said, if you ever get stuck or anything, just come and talk to me. He worked for Jack. Goes on. And then I was going to be part of the editing team for Night Cleaners. And I realised I didn't want to do it. And there were two other guys and they were a gang. And they were friends and they still are very good friends. And I walked out from one side of Soho, walked across to Jack Hassan's place, said to Bobby, I'm here. Can you get me a job? He said, yes.
Oh, that's a story. That's a story I didn't know. Yeah, so you walked to Jack Hassan, that's Solus, where I first kind of had a connection. Yeah. Oh, wow.
But I'd had a conversation with Tony Jackson, who did Kes, when I was doing transfer stuff, and he explained what he'd done in Kes, which was one mic on a very simple Nagra 3 outside with one mic. If you get it right, it's kind of really perfect. And he just talked about the idea of very simplified sound recording. So I had it in my mind to how to do it. I just didn't know how to do it. But Bobby taught me.
Bobby taught you?
Yeah.
Really?
And did you both meet on a film?
No.
No, we didn't. We met through another actress, an ex-girlfriend of John's who knew me and I knew him. And they split up. I tell you what happened. I was working in my friend's travel agency. An old friend of mine ran a travel agency. And she said, do you want 2 tickets to go to Peru for 10 days, £100 return? I thought, that sounds good. And so I asked all my friends, and they said, oh, no, I can't. No. And Di Patrick, a good friend of mine, why don't you ask Jon Sanders, because he's just finished a big job. So I rang up Jon, I said, do you want to go to Peru?
And the big job was Walcott.
Oh, really?
The big job was Walcott.
Serious, yeah. That was a big job, was it? Well, I know what you mean, but yeah.
He had the spare cash. Money. Anyway, we went to Peru together, just as friends, went up the highest railway in the world and all that, and only for 10 days. And then afterwards, I can't remember, he came back to my family's for Christmas. So anyway, it happened quite soon afterwards, and we got together. And that was it from then on.
I was looking up your credits, and it has you both working on a film called Hussey in 1980, which was before Walcott.
Yes, I played one of the nightclub hostesses in the sort of, sitting around drinking cocktails. And Jon was the sound recordist. And I think that was when you were still with Janet, wasn't it? So I knew him through her. But we were both in Hussey. A very, not particularly good film, I don't think. I can't even remember if I saw it. Did you see it, Jon?
No, I avoided it.
You didn't hear it?
I'll tell you a quite funny story. The assistant producers, or a trainee producer, who I know quite well, spoke to me later and told me that we were getting, and this is pertinent because it changed how I thought we should work when we did feature films. This was a cheap feature film, and it was cheap because they worked us into the ground. That's what was cheap about it. And it became to the point where it was intolerable. And I was chosen to represent the crew, to go and talk to the producers, to try and, at least have some overtime or stop at 6 o'clock or just something, Anyway, this guy, who later became a producer, was an assistant at that time, confessed to me 20 years later that he hid under the table to hear what it was like when the ACT member had a go at the producers. We won.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Hey, I got an interesting story about Walcott, which is in the same vein, because though it was a TV series, what was it, 3 one-hour episodes or something, or 4?
Yeah.
And we were shooting really fast, and there were complaints from the union, from other cinematographers to the union, saying we were shooting too much screen time every day, because we were shooting like some days 6.5 minutes of cut film. And they were really angry at that because they didn't want their members to shoot more than 4 minutes a day. That's the way it was back then.
Did it feel fast when we were doing it?
I didn't feel it did really. No, and I don't remember the hours being crazy. I do remember the drugs. I remember.
So do I.
I remember Colin, the director, getting really upset one day because I didn't have a fresh magazine ready, and the loader came to me and said, I can't get in the dark room. There's a big guy standing at the door and somebody's cutting coke in the dark room on the camera truck. Those were the days.
That was Colin Buxey, wasn't it? Colin Buxey directed that.
Yeah, Colin Buxey.
Oh,
yeah.
The lad.
He was great.
The lad.
The lad, yeah. It was funny. And then do you remember we were down at the East End of London and it was a scene where this Rolls Royce had to blow up? And they'd never got permission. So we shot the shot of the roller blowing up. Yeah, and then the producer said, get out of here as quick as possible. The sirens were going as the crew were disappearing out of the East End. I don't think they ever figured out what it was.
Those were the days.
You couldn't do it now, could you?
No.
I mean, it was kind of
health and safety and all that, yeah.
No, and also terrorism.
Yeah. But even so, just the attitude to it. As you said, it was like that. There was much more willingness to sort of improvise, and
I actually acted in it. I wasn't actually in the film, but you actually shot me doing a scene.
Doing what scene?
I did a scene. I remember I acted a scene
with Clive
I don't know what I was
Merrison.
doing. I sat in a chair and pretended to act, and you filmed me. Must have been memorable.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry about that, John. I don't remember.
I don't even remember you, but it must have been you.
No, really. Yeah, that was the one project I didn't operate on.
Oh, is that what it was?
Except for I operated at the end of one day when Colin suddenly said, oh, I need another shot. And the guy that was operating, whose name I won't mention, had already sort of wrapped and had his first joint of the evening.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
And he couldn't operate the shot. It was really funny. Anyway, we're getting off the subject.
I was trying to think of that scene. And I can't remember you behind the camera. Of course, it wasn't you behind the camera.
There you go.
No. Yeah. Yeah. But we'll say the one time. But we're getting off track.
Okay. So I knew all along that what I wanted to do, that this business of being a sound recordist and editor and all the rest of it was just to learn. And also it was to earn money and it was fun and to act, but to learn. And then we came up with the idea of painted angels, which was a Western in what it was like to be a prostitute in the Wild West in a very kind of as real a way as we could do it. And we, by hook or by crook, we got quite a lot of money, and we had big stars. We had Brenda Fricker, Kelly McGillis, etc., and we shot it, and it was, I think it was a good film, and we got recognised, but we also got a lot of abuse. And the abuse was essentially, we've got better things to do than sit around listening to women moan about their situation, which they'd never get away with now. And I also shot it in a way that, some of it quite conventionally, but a lot of it with developing shots, and that upset people, and because they couldn't recut it, and they tried. And Derek Malcolm they wanted to recut it, and Derek Malcolm came on our side, really, really looked after us, wrote in The Guardian, etc. And we got away. We got away with it. Then we thought, okay, we'll write another film script, the two of us, and we did. And we realised after we got half the money, 3/4 of the money, but you know what it's like, if you don't get all the money, you don't get any of the money. And we realised after about 3 or 4 years that we either wouldn't get the money or it would be ages and ages and ages. And so we had a choice, Anna and I. Either we kind of give in, become bitter, or forget it, or we come up with something that we could actually do ourselves that would utilize what Anna knew, what I knew, her friends, my friends, our joint experience, and do a film that, without permission, that we do it for ourselves. And that the essential criteria was that we would do it quickly, because obviously we knew that time is money. And then we came up with the idea of improvisation. And then I want Anna to talk about improvisation, because that's the clue to that's what we do. We do improvised acting. We don't do improvised screenwriting.
But I want to ask you about Painted Angels, though. Are you saying that wasn't improvised? I think...
No. Painted Angels was an absolutely straight up and down movie.
It was a script. We wrote the script together, yeah. We wrote it, yeah.
Right. So there was no improvisation on set?
No.
Right.
No. Can I just say that as when Jon said, we realised that we had to try and find another way to make films, the big liberation for us was technology, was digital, was when we realised that we didn't need to shoot on film. We could actually use digital cameras. And suddenly you can do it. You can do what you want. You don't have to pay for stock. You don't have to pay to have it developed. All that thing that makes it such an expensive business was the realization that we could make films however we wanted. And the technology, of course, got better and better and better. And now you look at film and you think, whoa, gosh, what happened to that? And it was, for me, we had an idea. We had some friends who had an empty house that they'd inherited in Faversham. And they said, well, you can use it if you want. And we got a bunch of friends together and we decided to make a film about the last days in a woman's life, shot over 3.5, 4 days. And it came out really well. And we got it seen, we got it shown in cinemas. And that's what started us off. We found a way of doing it. And we could do long takes because people were improvising and they were good at it. And the camera, we had, really good technicians that Jon knew that came and helped us. And that's how we started. And we've made 5 films like that now.
And you write a basis for it, right? Because it says it's written.
More than a basis.
What do your scripts look like then?
Cards all laid out with what happens in the scene and what goes on, yeah.
So, but it takes it's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. Maybe we think about it maybe for 2 years. But the first one we did very quickly, actually. But subsequently, we spent quite a lot of time taking notes, talking about it, whatever. Mm-hmm. And eventually, it comes down to, by some weird reason, most of our films have 32 shots in them, because one shot, one scene. So on each card, each card, it says who's in it, what the time of day is, where it is, what they're doing or talking about, and what's really going on, the subtext. And we lay those on a table, just like in Hollywood, and we work it out. Because if you lay it out, you can see how the story works. And then you shift those cards around and alter them, and you work until you think, okay, we've got something that really holds. In one way, you could say it was actor-proof, but that's the wrong way to think. But it can handle a certain divergence within when acting starts. But that when we're getting better and better at that, and that's our basis. That's sometimes we know we need 2 more or 3 more, or and we know that we won't know what it is until we get there. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we do it.
Do you shoot it in story order?
Yeah, we shoot it in sequence. We have to, because otherwise you wouldn't know where the hell you were going.
That's true.
Actually, the last one, which was in the Isle of Wight, the young man, James Northcote, couldn't come until later. So it didn't matter. So we actually fixed it so that his bits didn't kind of interfere. And we had a beginning scene where he was, and we just did a practice run with the musician. Mm-hmm. So in effect, we did it in order. It would be impossible. It would be impossible not to.
And before you start shooting, do you have a rehearsal time for the actors to talk to one another?
Yeah.
No?
Not rehearsal. Because if you do a rehearsal, that might be it. That might be the one you missed, you know.
You want.
Yeah. So yes, we do. Depending how well we know the actors, it depends how much information they need and how much talk they need. And then, for instance, on the last one, it was to do with two sisters. They talk to each other, and so you build it up that way. James had not done it before, so he felt he needed more information, more talk about his character and so forth. But I'd like to just to give it some context that's quite important. I'd say that we approach films in a slightly different way, in as much that, as Anna said, the first film was about a woman dying. Now that was my mother, but it wasn't. We changed it. You know, it wasn't my mum, but it was the experience was based on my mother. And Anna and I were there with my sister and my dad, looking after her until she died. Those 3 weeks after our honeymoon, as it was. So we had that experience. So we can't buy stuff in. We can't say, oh, we want 10 horses or a house or a tank or this or that, whatever. We're kind of hunter-gatherers. We have to use what we can get. And you build up from there. For instance, in the Isle of Wight film, Anna and I went just on a holiday, not a holiday, just a few days to the Isle of Wight. And she phoned up old friends who were there. And so they said, oh, we're around the corner. And we walked into this house and we both said, bloody hell, this is astonishing. We were about to go to France to shoot another film. So it was an amazing place. I mean, it was a huge house full of amazing stuff, junk and quality stuff, just disarray, like you couldn't build it. So I said to them, would it be all right, you know, in a few years' time, if we hired your house and sent you on a nice holiday, so give you enough money for a nice holiday? And they said, yes, that's absolutely fine. So we had a house. And then on the premiere of the previous film, the French film, Josie Lawrence turned up because she's a friend of the actress. And, you know, she's quite a big name here as an improviser and a comedienne. And
whose line is it anyway?
Yeah. So she said, to me, she said, oh, could I be in your film? I'm good at improvisation. I said, well, I'd heard, you know, she's terrible. She said, and off the top of my head, because I knew she knew Tanya. I said, you can be Tanya's sister. She said, I am her sister. So that was that part of the script written. Then the other thing that's really important for us is that all along the line, Anna and I have had a very close friend who came in to do the music for Painted Angels. He's a composer and a pianist. And he came by chance because he was the teacher of the violin teacher for one of our children. And so he's become part of our gang. And so our films have become increasingly musical, or he's an asset that we have to, that we feel that we can use because he's there. You've got a brilliant composer. So, for instance, the last one, we were thinking what to do. We've got these two sisters, the mum who's dead. How can we get that mother on the film through her? And she's a composer. So we came up with the idea of the piano player, you know, pianola, and old-fashioned music box. And only Douglas would say, all right, I'll do it, you know, to actually compose for that. And he did. And that's how we're doing it. We're using the assets that we have, and then we build the script around it.
But Anna, from an acting point of view, do you sometimes, maybe when you're thinking about what your character is, would you need a certain prop? Would you need something? Because oftentimes I hear actors saying, no, I need, my character would have this. Do you ever try and do that ahead of time?
Well, you see, sometimes my acting head was said, wouldn't it be nice if I had that? And then my producer perhaps says, no, you can't afford it.
Oh, that's a struggle.
That's the truth of it, you know. I mean, I always try and get a new frock out of it, I have to say. Or a different frock, not always a new one. The characters we come up with the idea for characters, but once we've written the scenario, they develop within that. Because when you're improvising, you start off thinking a certain way, and as you progress through the film, certain things change. So, and also we don't have huge budgets. So, we use what people have. And if necessary, I say you go out and buy a few things, you buy a new dress or something like that. But it's, yes, it's quite liberating in a way, because you're not tied down to, we all look after each other, and most of our films have quite a few women in them, so we look after each other. We make sure we look all right. We haven't got hair and makeup, but we we do our best. We do our best, and it's like community really. When you're shooting the film, you're like a family. Well, I mean, all films are like that. You're like a family, but ours is a particularly intense family because of the way we're working.
Anna, could you talk about what it's like to improvise? Because I don't know. I'm just a director watching you.
Well, we're doing it now. We're improvising. We're pretending to be filmmakers talking to these two incredibly illustrious people who are asking us about our films. And we're pretending. I mean, I had a friend, for instance, I lived in a small village. I had 2 or 3 friends who lived around there. I had a friend called Julie who lived on a farm and had barns. We had improvisations that used to go on for days. And they'd be incredibly complex family dramas. I mean, you just talk about it. You say, all right, you're the dad, I'm the sister, and these incredibly melodramatic things, usually involving an accident at some point. But it's children do it. Children improvise without thinking. They say, "You're the mummy, you're the daddy, and you're the neighbour next door who hates me." And then they play it. So in a way, it's a sort of, I mean, there are obviously, as you're an actor, you get sort of a bit more skilled at it, but it's basically that sort of basic human thing of playing, of pretending to be somebody else and playing.
And I think part of it too is you've got to be able to listen, because you don't know what that other person's going to say, and you've got to be able to go where they've just gone, even though you thought the scene was going that way. It must be a lot of fun because you never know what's going to happen.
Yes, every now and again things completely surprise you, but we usually have a fair idea of the direction it's going. But yes, sometimes things do surprise you, and those are the magical moments, obviously. And sometimes, if it's just drifting on and getting a bit pointless, we stop. Jon says, "No, stop. This is going nowhere." And you go, "Okay," and you rethink what you're going to do. But I think better at it's the wrong word, but I think we're finding more ways of making it work. And actors are so good at it. I mean, everybody thinks, improvisation is this magic thing. Actors can do it. I mean, most actors can, even if they think they can't. They can play the game, and it is like theatre games. It's like a game.
It'd be difficult to write, but not impossible, what people in our films say, because it's so detailed. And my job as the director is to make sure, which I don't have to do very much anymore, that there's no repetition, and that's kind of gone, pretty much. Sometimes it goes in the wrong direction dramatically, and it's not them, we've made a wrong decision that it should be. For instance, I remember doing a scene that was meant to be to do with Anna's isolation on a few films back, and we were sort of to talk about that with a young man actor. And I realised after a few takes it wasn't working. Actually, to show Anna's isolation, we had to talk about the young man, and he had to talk about himself. Therefore, Anna was again isolated. So that one had to flip that. To flip that round. Otherwise, most of my work with the actors is to do, and this is not that frequent either, is to do with the rhythm and the speed. So, for instance, in the last film, there was Anna and the young man get on with each other, and they come downstairs with this
doll's house, put it in a room, sit down next to each other, and the idea was that in the end they would kiss. And the first time, it was like 10 minutes later, they kind of plucked up enough nerve to kiss. And I said, "Can we do it a little quicker?" And the next one was like, whoom, bam. And then, so it was just a matter of, because there was, and I talked to the actor about it, said, normally if we got a kiss, the script tells you
all the way how to get there. Here it's tricky. You've got to figure out how to get there. So it's right, but it's still a surprise and it's still tense. So that was my job to actually help them on that, on the speed of it. But that's on the acting side, it's not a lot to do.
That's that's one of the most successful, poignant moments in the film for me. I think you're wondering about that, and there's the age difference between the characters, but you get to understand them, and when it actually happens, you can quite see it, and the way it's done in such a light way that it's kind of just two people, getting something from each other. I thought that was really successful. But I'm really interested. Okay, so you're doing that. I mean, a lot of the shots, you say you've got like 32 scenes and you play each scene is in one shot. How do you work with the cameraman, Dave Scott, I think, has shot most of your films? How do you work together to fix? Because some of the shots are quite specific. I mean, the camera will pan off an action and find something else and then come back again. I mean, it's not just locked on a two-shot.
Not at all. I mean, we think about it a lot, and it's a big part of how we operate. Say, for instance, you take the scene where, first of all, there's Anna. James is playing the flute, and Anna's standing by her man because they just been all for a row. Then the sisters come in, and Anna leaves, and then they ask James to play to do a certain song, and Josie dances, and then. So we have to follow her dancing around, which is obviously quite complicated for the operator. And then we have to but at the same time, Douglas, the composer, is mucking around on the keys of the piano to make it a bit strange because she's not hearing the music she normally hears. She's hearing her mother interfering or coming up with something strange. And then we wind up with the piano roll going through. So it's a close-up. So we just worked it out like you'd work it out. But we don't know we know it pretty much. We know where she's going to be, but we just work it out. And then we do just like you do. We work out the focus, roughly speaking, work out the focus points, and we do it. But we just walk it through. We just walk it through without any acting so we can get it. The next scene, which is when the two sisters are completely surrounded by their mother's junk, are saying what they want to keep and what they're willing to leave. That was very interesting because everybody on set had an input into that scene. Obviously, the two actresses, and my input was to get on the shelf. There were white fake alabaster busts, and I put them round in the junk and said, "These are the points, David, that you've got to hit. You aim for these." Focus is on his own. So all I said to David was, "You listen to the two sisters, and then you start to drift off into wherever you listen to them, and you just follow it round, and you come back, and then you go up to these pictures," which he did. He put the pictures on the wall, which is them as young people. It was something else. And I just said go, and everybody did it. And David told me that there was a point where he wasn't sure whether to stop or stay, and the grip just said, "Off, we're moving, David," and pushed him forward. He had no choice. So everybody was, and the focus puller I was sitting next to the focus puller wondering what the hell he was going to do, and he did what he did. And so it's what our shots are like. It's like a happening. Because the actors come first, and I say to the crew, "Listen, it's like Marilyn Monroe. You better get it right because it's going to be this time or not, And we don't. And please, unless the camera falls over, it's going to, keep going. So when I say go, everybody's right behind it because they know that could be the one, and everybody's got to be together. So it's kind of an amazing energy gets going. And if we get it in one, we get it in one, and we often get it in one, but the worst is three, actually. So everything has that kind of, which brings us all together in a way.
When you're covering so much with one shot, don't you ever get to the feeling, well, I like the beginning of one take and the end of the other? I mean, without doing, some directors will do sort of 40 or 50 takes when they have such a long, complicated piece of dialogue and staging. But and others will find a way to cut round it, but you don't.
No, it's my job really to make it. If say it doesn't work the first time, I have to figure out. Let's do it again and maybe again, so that there is a section from beginning to the end that will work. And sometimes I get it wrong, and when we come to the cutting room, I change the beginning. I don't know precisely the beginning, but my decision is there a section in there that says what we want to say in one piece? That's my decision, and my decision whether to stop or go on is based on that decision. It's based on it. I have had situations where, for instance, where they were talking to the dad's coat, talking to dad via his coat. It was great, and then it went off, and then it had a great ending. And I thought, and the editor said, "Oh, we could join them up." I said, "No. We sacrificed the great ending. We just have to stop when it starts to deteriorate, and that's just tough. That's just the way it is, and I don't mind at all."
It's amazing that you have such specific camera moves, but you're also improving, because that must put on the actors a certain amount of stress to improv, but also to be in the right place at the right time.
It's a nightmare.
No, I don't lie. It's not. We don't. We're not. They're not fixed. We know they're going to go. For instance, we know they're going to go this way, not that way. But we're relaxed enough to be able to handle it, whatever they do, unless it's silly.
Yeah, no, I mean it's usually quite straightforward. I mean, it's not like we're sort of, going around the house. I mean, sometimes we, going upstairs and things in different films. But I mean, if we sort of know what we're doing and where we're going and trust the crew to get it, most of the times it never gets too difficult. It's but maybe that's just because we know each other and we've worked with most of the actors before, and you just know, it's just an instinct really, that you don't bump into that and you try and finish there. And most of the time it seems to work. And we've never been in a situation where it's been a disaster and we've had to abandon it, to be honest.
It's amazing.
So, I mean, once or twice David said, after a bit he stopped. I said, "Listen, David, if anything goes really wrong really quickly, don't let it keep going, because we're wasting the energy and the efforts of the actors. If you just feel you've lost it for whatever reason, say it quick." And once or twice in our working together, he said, "I've just lost my concentration," and we said, "Fine, that's okay. It's completely fine. We'll start again." And you can see how that can happen, because you've got, he's really got, I mean, when you don't know what's going to happen, you're having to work very hard. Yeah. The sound recording is as complicated, especially as we increasingly are using the music that's produced on set. So in the last film, we recorded the sisters singing and the piano playing. This wasn't playback. This we did. Playback just wouldn't work for us. It would just be so weird. They just have to do it to get the whole thing going. And that's quite complicated, but it's made easy by. I listened to one of your podcasts the other day from a guy called Skip, a really nice.
Skip Livesey, yeah.
And I realised, although I'd spent a fair few years being a production sound mixer, how I'd forgotten how different it is what we're doing. And the big difference is we're not doing shot, reverse shot. So if you're not doing shot, reverse shot, you haven't got to get rid of the background sound to balance each shot. So what we do, we use very high quality microphones, but slightly wide angle, so that they actually get the outside sound. So for instance, in certain of the scenes, you can hear the crows outside or whatever it is, and or on the beach you can hear probably a bit more than you would normally. You can hear the rippling, the water underneath the stones as it goes out, all those sort of things. So I actually kind of go for that unless it becomes obtrusive, and that way you also get. You get all the presence as well of the clothes, of the walks, and everything else, because we're not just especially in American culture, which is very different to English or European sound culture. American, just listening to Skip, I thought, wow, they really are just interested in the voice, and everything else comes on afterwards. That presence, which he thought suggested might even be a bit spurious, all that presence. And I remember on Painted Angels, with the sound recordist was very, very good. He was Canadian, but he had been an English guy first, and he was trained in England. And we had I never met him, a sound supervisor who kept writing to the producers saying the sound's rubbish, and I hadn't listened to it, and it was great. And I just realised that the American culture wanted it that much cleaner than we did, and that we had the post-production facilities to actually clean it up, and we had no ADL at all, none whatsoever, and a very, very skilled and very experienced sound mixer actually got rid of, in post-production sound, got rid of everything. And that was it's just a slightly different, it's actually a considerably different approach from European to American, I think. But ours is taking it one step further.
How much did you take from your experience on working on documentaries? Because I mean, the way of staging, as you do, and allow the operator to follow the action with a kind of flexibility, it seems to me takes a lot from documentaries, the kind of verity documentaries.
Roger,
anyway.
I remember, and it's really stuck in my mind, working with you when we were in the mental asylum, then when the world changed, and we were in a room with an Irish guy and what seemed to be his tormentor, who was actually a doctor, and it was a very empty room, and there were two chairs in it, and suddenly the Irish guy got up and walked to another chair, just suddenly, and you preempted him by moving across to get the frame right. And afterwards I said to you, how the hell did you know? And you said you watched his eyes and you knew he was going to move. And I've always remembered that because I was astonished. I was just absolutely astonished. And I think that's that kind of experience of what we did when we were documentarists, and watching documentary cameramen like Nick and you and Charles Stewart and so forth. I think it's hugely part of it, of actually how to contain the action with a degree of elegance and simplicity, which we all learned. I mean, but I learned it from watching you and all my peers.
What do you want the audience to take away from the films you do? I mean, they seem very personal. Like you're saying, one is really based on your mother's death, and they seem very much taken from both of yours personal experiences. What are you trying to share with an audience?
I think what's interesting about the stories we tell is we think they are based on a lot of personal experience, and sometimes we're just, what we think would work. But what is interesting is that when people come and see, when we talk to audiences after the films, is that our experience is not unusual. Is that the experiences we're making films about are universal. Absolutely. And, I mean, the Low Tide, the first one, was when we realized, because people came up and said, how did you know that it was like that, looking after a dying husband or a dying wife, or all those things? And the breakup of, when we do, we've dealt a lot with the breakup of marriages, and so many people know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's what's interesting about improvisation, because as characters, you have to be real. You can't bullshit. It has to come from somewhere real, and you have to relate to your fellow actor and make people believe that you are breaking up or getting together, whatever's happening. And I think that's what it is. It's like, it's not an escape from reality, but it's not a justification. What's the word? It's like an understanding, and it sort of gives people permission to acknowledge the experiences they've gone through, that it's not just them, they're universal. I mean, I think although they're very specific and set in quite small worlds, I think the themes of like marriage breaking up, children leaving, all those things are universal themes. And we've just found a way, in a quite modest way, I suppose, of exploring those ideas and those realities in relationships. Does that make sense?
We had letters from the last film, didn't we, Anna? We had letters from people whose mothers had died. Really touching letters about, it's wonderful that you understand how it feels. And when we had Back to the Garden, we had people came up to Anna especially and said, how did you know what it's like to lose your husband? And so in a way you're giving their experience a validity. And it's very touching when you go to, because we've done lots of Q&As, Anna and I, and it kind of makes it really worthwhile when people come up to you and say, "Oh, thank you, that's how I felt," and it's kind of, and when we put it up big on a big screen, it's kind of, yes, it gives it a validity, and it gives it a reality.
I'm interested also. The other aspect of this is in the independent film world. You started with Painted Angels, which how did you get to do that film, and how was that financed? And you got major actors in it. I mean, how did that sort of come about?
There was an organisation called the First Film something or other, and a young guy.
First Film Foundation.
Young guy, without whom we would never have made that film, made a lot of contacts. He made contacts with British Screen. He made contacts with the BBC. Then we found a producer, Anne Scott, and this, nothing happened. Then suddenly she realised she had a partner in Canada. And it just came together through British Screen, BBC, Canada. That was it. Those were the three financial inputs.
What do you remember most about the experience of doing that film? You say the film maybe was panned a little afterwards, but I remember it as being talked about quite, generously.
Yes. Anna.
Well, we had. What was it like to when we were in Canada? We had to get it. We took our daughter was still, still at infant school, and so she came and she had a nanny and everything, and we left the boys at home. So we were moved as a family, and we had to get it. All the exteriors had to be shot before the snow came. That was the thing, because we were on the prairies, and they were all watching the weather forecast all the time. And it was a sort of extraordinary experience, really, because we were in a different culture. Saskatchewan is actually, is the middle of nowhere. And it's like, it feels like it. And we had Kelly McGillis and Breda Fricker, two big names who were absolutely wonderful to work with. And it was, making the film was an extraordinary experience.
Shot in sequence.
So everybody knew what their story was, and that it didn't cost that much more, but, they made a bit of a fuss about that. But it was fantastic. I mean, it was the best time of it, really, because we made great friends. Our daughter was at school, so she made friends. And we, it's an extraordinary place to be. The landscape is like nothing else. It's so bleak. It's unbelievable. But
and studios.
And the studio was fine. This was a big studio where we moved into after the weather broke. The trouble really started when we got back, when, the Canadian, I can't remember, or was it Cinepix or something? The
Lionsgate.
The distributors. Lionsgate, you went, oh, this is not quite what we thought. We didn't think we were getting this. Bit bleak. Not many laughs.
Not too titillating.
Rotterdam, that was a great experience. I mean, without Derek Malcolm, I think we would have given up. But he was just wonderful. He wrote a whole piece in The Guardian. Then he spoke to the people at Rotterdam and got us into Rotterdam, where we sort of spent a lot of time with him. But it was the BFI turned us down. They didn't want to show it. I mean, it really divided people, that film. I mean, I didn't think it was that controversial, but people either loved it or hated it. It was really like that.
It felt very, very... Wow. Anna and I were in a very awful state because it felt as if they were going to destroy our film. And it was unbearable, wasn't it, Anna? It was absolutely
horrible,
unbearable.
Horrible time.
Horrible experience. It was really, really upsetting. And I remember the phone call that finally did it. This guy, who I knew quite well from the Canadians, said, "Okay, we're not going to show your film. We're not going to cut your film up. But if you think we're going to fucking show it, you've got another thing coming." That's what he said. Actually, what he said.
Welcome to the film industry, yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. And I think they showed it without a poster somewhere in the Arctic Circle in Canada. That was it.
Because they had to show it, contractually they had
it was
in a cinema.
The idea is that they put all that effort into something that you really loved, and they were going to muck it up was agony. I never felt that kind of agony before, to tell you the truth.
So now you can make your own judgment. But how does that impact? How do you finance what you're doing now? Even though you need minimal amount of money, you still need some sort of finance. And then how do you get your films shown? What is the outlet now for your work?
Well, I mean, we don't spend very much on them, and we've used, we've had savings, bits of inheritance, and so we've managed to self-finance them. We've just run out of money now, so we want to make another one. We've got to try and get some more, not a huge amount, but a bit more money. And we've got a retrospective coming up at the ICA in September. We're showing all 5 of our films that we've made since we started with Low Tide. And we're hoping that might, raise our profile a bit. That's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, we could afford it. I mean, we paid everybody. Not wonderfully, but everybody got the same wage. We went to the focus puller, and everybody got, including the actors, got his wage. But we do it over 2 weeks, so it's done very quickly. You get deals for equipment and so forth. We did do crowdfunding for the film before last, which was highly successful.
Oh, the one in France. The one in France, yes, that we got crowdfunding.
And every now and then, somebody very nice gives us some money. And we have made money back, but not enough. I mean, why not enough? I'm not sure, because it's tricky. I mean, the last film came out just after COVID. We went into 40 cinemas, but we still didn't make enough money to get into profit, even though into 40 cinemas. We'd never been into 40 cinemas before, and we had a distributor before. Who was good, but then I realised what was happening was that actually it was becoming a bit of a vanity product. They take money from us to put it out and then spend as little as they could in actually doing anything. So we then found a friend of ours from a long way back, introduced us to another distributor who is actually works seriously hard to get us out into the cinemas, and did so. And I think we were probably a bit unlucky in as much that we were just after COVID, so people hadn't come back and so on and so forth. But I'm kind of optimistic that the difference between not making very much and making enough to kind of cover us and get into profit it can't be that much. And this is probably one of the reasons why we're doing the ICA thing, so there's a sense of expectation. People know more who we are, so that, Jon and Anna are making a new film and so what and other. And we are getting, we've got a bigger gang, we've got distributors on our side, we've got more energy, we've got people know a bit more about us. So I think it's just a matter of keeping going. But the tricky thing is we actually have run out of money. And so maybe that's a good thing. So we've actually got to find some money. But we've got to find some money with people that aren't going to interfere.
You seem very set on distribution in the cinema. Now, don't you look at companies like Netflix and streaming services?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
You know, when you were talking about the 60s and 70s and how vibrant the film world was then, with their sort of independent world and everything. But hasn't that now moved to the streaming services in some way?
Yes, I mean, the film...
I think it might have been late September or Back to the Garden, I'm not sure. That went on Netflix, but I don't think... I mean, it was the very early days of Netflix, you know, and it didn't keep going. I know streaming services would be great, but I think we had another one out. I can't remember what it was on. But it's quite hard to make a lot of money from those unless you've got a bit... you need the cinema really to let people know you're there. Yeah. Unless you're doing a big series, but
I'm sure that if we were a little bit more successful, I mean, we're obviously, you can download our film from all sorts of platforms, but I'm not sure we've seen any money from it. I mean, somebody's making some money from it, but it's not very much at all. So I think the difference between from making a tiny bit to making a lot, I don't know what that difference is, but I'm very keen to find out. And we talk to our distributors about that all the time, because we can't keep going like this, you know. But the energy's there, and we were going to do another film this September, but we realised with the retrospective coming up, we hadn't found a location, that we simply put it off to next year, because we just couldn't go from one to the other. Couldn't go straight from, because I think the retrospective is going to be quite a lot of hard work if we're going to make the most of it, which we are. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, we're always hopeful, Roger. We're always hopeful.
Or deluded. We're not sure which.
Do you know anybody else that's deluded like you, that's working in the same way as you guys do? As you say, I mean, with the technology now, I mean, basically anybody can kind of make a film if they put their mind to it without spending too much money. But you seem quite unique in the way you approach the work.
I don't think there are that many.
I don't think there are many people doing what we do. I mean, perhaps they got more sense. I don't know. But I think that maybe young people are doing it. Yeah. But a lot of young people now want to make shorts, which seems to me, it's all right. It's a calling card. But I mean, there's not a huge audience for it. But I don't know I don't know many people. Maybe I just don't know of them because they're not getting their films out. I mean, that's what's happened. I think the cinema is really having a hard time at the moment, right across the board, is that, you know, people aren't going back to the cinema. I mean, we showed our last film at the Phoenix in North London, which is a lovely independent cinema. And the young women that ran it were thrilled because we had, you know, a quarter of the seats sold in this cinema. It's a beautiful, beautiful old cinema. And we were talking to them because we didn't watch the whole film. We were just talking to them while the audience were in. And they said, we're not sure we're going to survive. Because after COVID, the audiences were not coming back. I mean, there was all that big hoo-ha about Barbie and Oppenheimer and all that, you know, it was going to get people into the cinemas. Well, it might have done for a few weekends, but it hasn't. I don't think it's transferred into other sorts of films that people go to see.
It has a bit, I think. We have a friend, an ex-student who's doing it, but he made the mistake of going to the BFI at one stage, and they're worse than Hollywood. You know, they kind of completely... They're just, interference is the name of the game, and they're not very good at it either. So I just said to him, listen, Jamie, don't, you know, just try and find whatever it takes. It just, you can't do it that way, you know. And I think I'm sure there are. And this is one of the reasons why two reasons. I'm really pleased about the ICA, because I think, you know, to some degree, we are an example. You know, it can be done. That's true. And also, I think being on your podcast, it's great for us, because what we're saying is it can be done, and it can, and you can make really nice films, and you don't have to compromise, and it doesn't have to be expensive. If you can, if you've got the skill and the will, you can. and you have an audience. I mean, all the young people I know in films all listen to your podcast, and I'm thinking, great, because there's going to be more young people listening to your podcast and think, oh, those two can do it, and they're not even young. And I think it should happen, and I think it could happen, and I think probably it will happen too. Because we can't sit here and do nothing, can we? They can't.
Right.
Otherwise it's going to die, isn't it?
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
this is great.
Yeah.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.